We're going to talk a little bit about Alec Baldwin. So what happened last week? Well, for those of you who don't know, Alec Baldwin killed somebody back in 2021 on the set of this film called Rust, which he was a producer on. It was going to be a low-budget Western, and it was filmed out there in New Mexico. And a camera woman, she got shot in the chest by Alec Baldwin when they were filming a scene of him kind of cross-drawing the pistol out of his holster and pointing it at the camera. They wanted the shot where it was going to point right at the camera, and the gun went off, and she got killed, and the bullet actually traveled and hit another director on the scene, Joel Souza. And so there's been a lot of cooperation on Alec Baldwin's part. He's been public about it. He went on interviews. He's claimed that he didn't even pull the trigger, that the gun just went off. And so the sheriffs did a 1-year investigation on this case, and they finally turned it over to the DAs recently, and the DAs came out and said, we're charging Alec Baldwin and also the armorer on the movie set with involuntary manslaughter on 2 separate theories. And the theories are, well, basically, what is involuntary manslaughter? Involuntary manslaughter means you didn't intend to do it. It's a felony crime where you killed somebody and you did not intend to do it. And the way they prove that out there in New Mexico, and it's like that in a lot of states, is number one, they prove that you were, and this is the New Mexico DA comes out and says, if you were negligent with what you did. That's not completely true when you get into it, but we'll get into that in a minute. The other way they prove it is if you committed a unlawful act, which is not a felony. And so there have been cases where there's a crime on the books out there in New Mexico, which is negligent use of a firearm. So if you negligently use a firearm, doesn't matter if you shoot somebody, doesn't matter if you kill somebody, if you negligently use a firearm, then you can be convicted of that misdemeanor. And so what they're saying is, well, involuntary manslaughter against Alec Baldwin is you killed somebody while you committed the misdemeanor of negligent use of a firearm. And so that's one theory that they're going to put towards Alec Baldwin. The second theory is involuntary manslaughter, not misdemeanor manslaughter rule, but the second theory is you killed somebody and you did it without due caution or circumspection, which means basically you weren't careful enough. And the New Mexico DA says, look, that's a negligence ruling. She's a little bit incorrect about that, and maybe she has a misunderstanding. It's not just negligence. Criminal law does not like to charge people on an accident. You need criminal negligence, and criminal negligence is more than you just didn't act with ordinary care. That's negligence for a civil lawsuit. You can sue them for money. It has to rise to criminal negligence. And so what does that mean? Criminal negligence means it wasn't that you just weren't careful enough. That's not what it means. It means that you were actually reckless with your behavior. And so what does reckless mean? Well, it means that you knew that something was going to be unsafe and you just disregarded the safety of people. So both of these charges are levied against Alec Baldwin. And I don't know if the DAs understand this or not, because when I actually saw the DA on the TV, it seemed like she really didn't know the ins and outs of what she's charging. But based on what I've seen from the investigation, I go, these are very viable charges against Alec Baldwin that are coming up. Why? Because he's also a producer on the set. Not only the actor that had the gun in his hand, but as a producer on the set. And as a producer on the set, who is basically the main funding behind this low-budget movie, which cost estimated $21 million. I mean, $21 million is considered low budget these days. But look, he was a producer on the set, and there was a lot of things that came out in the investigation, things that were even told to the media in interviews by people who were on that set, people who didn't take the jobs on that set, a guy who quit the movie the day before the shooting happened and sent an email to producers, that these were very dangerous conditions out there. So Alec Baldwin is more so, in my opinion, liable as the producer on this set that had notice of all these conditions. And he acted reckless as the producer on the set. And then maybe because he knew how the conditions were on the set, because of his role as producer, maybe being handed that gun at the last moment and someone yelled, "Cold gun," and when he pulled the trigger, or he says he didn't pull the trigger, the gun went off, then it was reckless behavior. Now, let's get into what we know about what happened on the set of that movie, okay? Well, we know Russ was shot in New Mexico, and it's supposed to be a 21-day shoot. And this is relevant. Why? Because 21 days isn't a long time to shoot a movie. And they took a lot of budget They cut corners on everything. This is what's coming out about the movie. This is what the sheriff's investigation turned up. This is what people on the set were saying. The emails back and forth between the crew members, including the armorer who was also charged with involuntary manslaughter. She's also charged, and it's her first time actually being the lead armorer on a set. So why is she having her first job as a lead armorer on a set? Well, let's get to it. We have interviews with other veteran prop masters and armorers who turned down the job for this movie. They turned down the job. Neil W. Zarumsky is a veteran prop master out there in Hollywood, man. He's done a lot of movies. And he turned down the position. September 2021, he says, I'm not taking this job. He tells Times, the New York Times, he was troubled, and I quote, by the producer's refusal to hire a fully staffed props department, including an armorer to handle the guns and another person as a props assistant. He said, no, the producers are insisting that one person was going to do both jobs. And he didn't feel comfortable taking that position because of that. Because one person can't do both of those jobs on a movie like that. This was a Western movie, Rust. There was going to be a lot of gun scenes. Over half the days of the 21 days were going to be gun firing scenes. So he didn't want to, he said, no, I'm turning down that paycheck. I'll wait for the next job. At least a dozen other experienced prop masters and armorers turned down the job on Rust. So who gets hired? Hannah Gutierrez Reed. She's 24 years old. She's trying to make it out there in Hollywood. And she gets hired to oversee all the weapons and the bullets and projectiles and blanks that are going to be used on the set. It's her first time being a head armorer. Or actually, I'm reading here. I'm mistaken. Her second job is head armorer. Her first was a Nicolas Cage movie called The Old Way back in 2021. But she's new, right? And she's trying to make it. And so she says, look, she's concerned. She sent emails to the producers that she was being stretched too thin on Rust. These are the emails that have come out in the investigation. She's emailed producers multiple times. I'm being stretched too thin. That there's guns that are being left unattended on the sets. I don't have time to check every single gun because I'm doing both jobs over here. I'm doing both jobs. So she has put the producers on notice, and they have basically deflected all of her complaints. She acknowledged that she loaded the weapons that day. She acknowledged that she loaded these weapons. So what? So this is what it really comes down to. There's not supposed to be any live ammunition on the set of a movie. None. But somehow a live bullet was in that gun that killed Helena Hutchins, the camerawoman, the cinematographer. A live bullet is what shot out of that gun. So how did live ammunition make it into the gun? Why was there live ammunition on the set? If there was live ammunition on the set, who was responsible for checking to make sure the ammunition loaded into that gun wasn't live ammunition? You probably heard the term blanks, right? I mean, shooting blanks. And I thought myself, when I first heard about shooting blanks, I thought you're just shooting. It's not even a bullet coming out of the gun. It's like a cap gun. It's just making the noise. That's not true, though. That's not true. Blanks actually do shoot a projectile. And you need to be a couple feet away from it in order for it not to harm you. And on the scene of Rust, there was actually someone shot them in the foot with one of these guns with a blank and injured their foot. That was one of the mishaps that happened on set. Another prop person accidentally had a live misfire, didn't shoot anybody, but had a live misfire, right, of a blank. And there was actually an explosion that went off on the set. And this is why the guy quit the day before Helena Hutchins was killed. He quits the set. He sends an email. He quits the movie. He sends an email to producers, and he says he has never seen such abhorrent safety precautions on a movie set before. So these are the things that are coming out that are making Alec Baldwin, as a producer, have knowledge that things were a little bit more dangerous than they should have been. People on that set, including the guy who quit, said safety protocols that are usually in place in all the movies they've ever worked on are not in place on the Rust set. And the only thing the producers are telling everybody is, this is a low budget movie. We can't go over budget. We got 21 days to shoot. We got 12 days of actual filming, and we got to go, 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 go. People were being overworked. At the time, the unions of people who work on these films were actually about to go on a strike. And Alec Baldwin came out and, like, I think in an Instagram post at the time of the shooting, before the shooting, but at the time the film was being shot, he goes, hey, people in the industry, frontline workers, if you feel like you're being wronged, do the strike. So he's behind the people. At the same time, he is implementing what the unions and union workers are considering conditions that violate their current union agreement. Forget about what they're trying to bargain for. They're not even getting what they bargained for on the set of Rust. So this guy quits. He sends that email. So that's what the DAs are looking at. They go, all right, we've uncovered the fact that a bunch of Hollywood veteran armorers and prop masters didn't want to take this because they were concerned about safety, that you weren't hiring enough people. Then you hired someone who was kind of inexperienced to lead it and take 2 jobs when really you need 2 people for those 2 jobs, and she's going to take it. She voiced concerns that she couldn't do it for 2 jobs, and still all of that just went neglected. And now we have somebody dead. Look, I was the same as everybody when this came out, that this is an accident and you're not going to see Alec Baldwin get criminal charges. But the sheriff turned over a 512-page report to the DA's office after a year of investigating. Multiple interviews, interviewing other people in Hollywood. And the DA started looking at the case a little bit different. I'm telling you, they were like, this is finger-licking good right here. We got Alec Baldwin as a producer. This is going to be an offensive set of facts that we can put in front of a jury. And this is going to be what we call a sexy involuntary manslaughter case. A lot of those cases, you get involuntary manslaughter charged, and it's not like that jury appeal case because the intent is not there. Well, let's talk about some of the things that are going to come out that might come back to bite Alec Baldwin. He claimed he did not pull the trigger. Okay, this gun was sent off. The actual gun that was shot was handed to law enforcement by the armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reed the day of the shooting. They sent that gun off for testing. That gun was tested by firearms and ballistics experts. And those ballistics experts have concluded that this hammer revolver, which Alec Baldwin's story is he pulled the gun out, he points it at the camera, and he pulled the hammer back, and then the gun just fired. So it's a malfunctioning gun, right? Well, these experts say no. They put it through extensive testing, and there's absolutely no way that gun fired without the trigger being pulled. And as a prosecutor, trigger pull is something you always bring up when we're at trial, and there's always this. Defendants try this all the time to say, oh, I didn't pull the trigger, or it was an accidental pull where I did not intend to shoot. You're in a murder case where it's like we're proving that you premeditated and intended to kill somebody. It's a good defense if you could say, hey, I was holding the gun, but the gun went off, or I didn't even mean to pull the trigger. The trigger pull was so light. So firearms experts, that's one of the first things they look for. How hard do you need to pull back the trigger in order for that gun to fire? And I'll tell you, on these revolvers, a lot of times, if you've never shot a firearm, it's not the easiest thing in the world to just pull a trigger back on some of these revolvers. So they put it through extensive testing, and what law enforcement experts are going to say is you absolutely could not have fired that gun without pulling the trigger. It wasn't you pulled the hammer back and it malfunctioned. We put it through extensive testing. Here's the problem with it, though, okay? I don't see Alec Baldwin pleading guilty to a felony involuntary manslaughter. I could see him taking a lesser plea, like one of the first directors just took a couple months ago, and we'll get into that. He took a plea to misdemeanor negligent use of a firearm, which means he might be testifying against Alec Baldwin. He actually took a plea to negligent use of a firearm, so now he will not have Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination because his case is pretty much done and closed. He can't incriminate himself. That's what prosecutors do. They get people to plea out, and then they get them to testify later. Now, usually you don't give the guy the deal and have him actually plead guilty and enter it until after you got that testimony. But there's several ways to skin a cat, so this could potentially be testimony used against Alec Baldwin. But let's get into what is the problem here at trial, when we get to trial. Yeah, law enforcement's going to have their firearm experts up there saying, that gun could not have gone off by accident. Well, I'm telling you, as a former prosecutor and now current criminal defense attorney here in Las Vegas, expert witnesses on both sides come out, and you got experts on the defense side, they're going to say what the defense want them to say. And you got experts on the law enforcement side, they're going to say what law enforcement wants them to say. They're hired guns. I'm not saying that The law enforcement experts just say whatever law enforcement needs them to say. It's usually the defense experts that kind of go over the line and say whatever they need to say in order to justify their paychecks. Why is that? Well, this is what they do for a living, and they're not getting hired by law enforcement. So how much money do you think a defense expert who charges $300, $400, $500, $600, $1,000 a day, $300 an hour for their testimony and their preparation for testimony? They're making a lot of money. This is what they do for a living. If they start testifying contrary to what the defense attorneys want them to say, the defense attorneys are not going to hire them. So these are hired guns. And this is how messed up the entire system is, as far as once their testimony makes it into the record, and then these appellate attorneys review the record, and they use that record to submit it to Supreme Court judges and appellate judges. These appellate judges are treating this hired gun testimony as if it's true, and it kind of changes the landscape of how to do trials later. Well, that's what's really going on. So let's get down to what the defense experts are going to say for Alec Baldwin. Well, they're going to say, no, definitely the gun could have malfunctioned. That's what they're going to say. And all a defense attorney needs to do is raise a reasonable doubt to the propriety of the charges, to the guilt of the charges. And by duty, a jury is supposed to acquit that person if there's a reasonable doubt. It has to be beyond all reasonable doubt. It's a high prosecutor for a burden, high burden for a prosecutor to meet. And there's a reason for that. We don't want to put people in prison or give them felonies unless a jury of your peers believes that you did the crime beyond all reasonable doubt. So the experts are going to say that. But here's the further problem. Not only would the experts say that even if the gun was still viable to be tested, but what has come out is that the law enforcement experts, the ballistic experts that were testing this firearm, they tested it enough to get to their conclusions, but then it did actually have a misfire. It did. But it was after the gun broke during testing. So the gun is broken now. And then it had a misfire after it broke. So they tested it so much, and it was probably an older gun, it finally broke. So now the defense experts are going to have a field day with this. We can't even test the gun ourselves because they broke it during testing. And now they're saying they pulled the trigger X amount of times before it broke, and it never had a misfire before that. Well, it could. The defense experts are going to come out and say it could have had misfires before that. You just didn't get it to do it. And now since you broke the gun, our experts can't even look at it. Matter of fact, this might not even be a trial issue. Alec Baldwin, I'm sure, is going to have some pretty good attorneys. They're going to get paid very well, so they're going to do a lot of work before trial to justify the money that they're getting. They're going to challenge this before trial. They're going to say, Judge, we want you to exclude the firearms expert testimony from the law enforcement because they didn't even preserve the weapon for us to test ourselves. They tested it until it broke, and now it is misfiring exactly how Alec Baldwin said it misfired in his hand. Either way, does this lend itself towards a finding of reasonable doubt at a trial on involuntary manslaughter, which, look, in the minds of jurors, everybody's going to sit back there and say, this is an accident. This is an accident. And that's going to be sitting in the back of their mind whenever these other things are being raised. If you're sitting at a trial and someone stabs somebody 39 times to death after breaking into their house, and a little bit of this expert testimony comes out that could raise a reasonable doubt, juries are human. They're less apt to even think they're going to let this killer off the hook for that. But this is not a cold stone killing. The prosecutor's not alleging that. So it's going to come down to how offensive they find everything else that happened on the set. So that's one aspect of Alec Baldwin's defense, that his claim, which he's maintained since it happened, that he did not even pull the trigger. If he can get one juror to believe that, or one juror just to doubt that maybe he didn't pull the trigger, it's reasonable to think he didn't pull the trigger, well, Alec Baldwin's going to walk. He's going to walk. The other thing that we can look at when it actually gets down to the trial is, as an actor, Alec Baldwin is saying, somebody hands me a gun and says cold gun, and cold gun in the industry means there's no live ammunition in there, that he should be able to rely on that. So there's nothing criminally negligent. There's nothing reckless about him, even if he pulled the trigger, to think that it was going to fire a bullet. That's where it comes into play as what was his knowledge as a producer on how bad the safety conditions were there at the scene. So one thing that concerned me when I'm looking at this case is the amount of investigation that actually went into it. Okay, you have an accidental killing, and I'm telling you that there was extra care put into this case. There was extra investigation done on this case. A 512-page report done on an accidental shooting. It's only done because it's Alec Baldwin. I mean, I look on court TV and they say, no, you treat everybody under the law the same. That's how we do it in the U.S. That's not true. I'm telling you, that's not true. I've been in the trenches so long. Everybody does not get treated the same. Justice is not blind, and the law is not applied equally. And I'll tell you, it's kind of the reverse of what some people think. Some people think, oh, the people who are rich and are famous, or the media is covering them, that they get treated better. I'll tell you, sometimes it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite. Sometimes when you're a public figure, you get treated harsher because of the fact that you're famous. Sometimes because you have a lot of money. When the media is covering it, you get treated harsher because the DAs are elected officials, and elected officials have aspirations as politicians also. They're looking to go on further. So if they can make their name off of prosecuting somebody who has notoriety, man, it only takes a lawyer one big case, in their career to make their name. Think about Johnny Cochran. Johnny Cochran, yeah, everybody knew him in LA. He was this big civil rights attorney. But man, he represented OJ and won the OJ case. His career was set after that. Set. I think about local attorneys here in Las Vegas. Chesnoff and Schoenfeld. What? They represent Paris Hilton and Bruno Mars on some cocaine possession charges, and they are set. They're set. Now they represent Marshawn Lynch. They represent all these people. Well, it works the same in government too. As a prosecutor, if you prosecute a really big-time case, the public is going to be aware of it, and you're going to be able to have a good political career. And so here, they're going after Alec Baldwin, and they did a ton of investigation. But I don't have a problem with investigating a case where someone got killed. I mean, look, this cinematographer got killed. She had kids. It looks like the things that were being done on the set of Rust were completely out of line with industry standards, that they were reckless, and someone needs to be held accountable. I get that. Investigate the hell out of it. Do it. And if charges are warranted, bring them. Like I said, I think this case is going to have jury appeal. I think based on what we're hearing from other people who turned down the job, people who quit the set, and people who are on the set, and the emails that are damning that it came out about the safety precautions on the set, I think this makes this case very, very sexy to a jury, and a jury will be offended when they hear about it. That being said, why is the sheriff's report already in the hands of Court TV? Court TV, as journalists, have already gotten the full 512 pages of reports. This is very, very strange to me, because when you're prosecuting a case as a DA, you're always trying not to leak all this internal investigation out to the media while the case is still pending. And they've leaked it out before they even filed charges, and they're leaking it out at the same time that they are telling everyone we're filing charges. All of a sudden, these journalists have 512 pages of reports in their hands. I find that very curious. You go down into Texas, down in Uvalde, they still won't disclose their internal reports on that. But here, everything's just turned over. There's a good reason not to turn things over in somebody's case, especially in Alec Baldwin's case. And this is the reason why law enforcement, and when I was a prosecutor, I would advise law enforcement, don't turn the body camera over to the news so they can run wild with it on the news. Why? Especially in a case like Alec Baldwin, you are tainting the jury pool. The potential jury pool out there that can hear this case, the Alec Baldwin case is going to be all over the media. They're going to be dissecting these reports. It's going to be on the news every night. Every potential juror, unless they're living under a rock, is going to know details about the investigation. You're in jury selection as an attorney. We'll submit a jury question ahead of time so we don't have to waste time in court. Are you privy to any of the news reports about this case? If so, if you even know that Alec Baldwin shot somebody, let's get you off the jury right now. Let's get you off the jury, because normally you wouldn't have to get them off the jury just because they were aware of the case in the media. You could cure a lot of that. But the fact that we have all of these 512-page complete investigation out there for public consumption at this point, and whatever the reporters take is going to be on it, that's what they're going to report, and they're going to say, this is what the sheriff's investigation said here. This is what the sheriff's investigation said there. Well, jurors are going to come in, and here's a big problem. What jurors are not going to want to sit on the Alec Baldwin case? I mean, you get a jury summons, you go down to court, man. I really feel bad for you if you get put on one of these construction defect cases that take 6 months, and we're talking about light switches being put 2 feet in the wrong place. And so then we had to go back and fix all the light switches so that we could put the sinks in the right place. And it's 6 months of expert testimony. Man, I feel bad for you. But you come in there, it's like, oh, this is the Alec Baldwin case? Oh, how long is it going to take? 2 weeks? Oh, man, I want to sit for jury service on this. Well, have you been privy to any information, ma'am or sir, that might ruin your ability to be impartial on this case? Have you heard anything about the investigation? You know, the 512-page report that the media was given before they even filed charges. Have you seen any of that? No, not me. And what little bit I have heard, I could sit on this case. Oh, man. You know, and that's another reason why the defense attorneys for Alec Baldwin, you don't plead him out on this case. You take it to trial, because a lot of trials get overturned on appeal. A lot of trials get overturned on appeal. And a lot of trials get overturned because of jury selection issues, right? Jury selection issues. A juror comes out after the case and says, hey, yeah, this is what went on, especially with the Alec Baldwin case. All the media wants to interview them, and there's nothing blocking them from writing a book about jury deliberations. Imagine a book comes out a year and a half, 2 years after the case, and the juror is going, oh, yeah, you know, I was going home and I was looking at the 512-page sheriff investigation report on my laptop. I was Googling it because we were not sequestered. Or before trial, I just wanted to be on the case so bad that I told him I didn't see this. Hey, case getting reversed. Case getting reversed. And so, yeah, I have a big problem with them turning over the entire sheriff's investigation report. I find it very, very curious. I mean, we've already seen on the news, there's footage of the interviews that Alec Baldwin is giving to investigators in the interview room after the shooting happened. This stuff is available online if you Google it. This is ridiculous. This is not the way that an investigation is supposed to be ran. This is not the way a prosecution is supposed to take place. Look, Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer, she was killed by a live round. This was a real bullet that was fired out of the gun. And what's on everyone's mind is, how did a live round even make it onto the set of the movie Rust? And the investigation, I'm telling you, the people who've looked through this 512-page report that's been made public, you know, to the journalists, which is completely contrary to what should be going on in a criminal investigation at this point, but it is made public. They have not been able to determine what the source of this live ammunition was, how it even made it to the set. So we're just all left here to speculate, and I'm sitting here speculating just like everybody else. I'm thinking, look, they're making a Western movie. They're out there in the middle of New Mexico. Just kind of, you know, here in Las Vegas, we got these patches of desert, and people just go out there and they fire their firearms, right? And they said, wouldn't it be fun for us to have some live ammunition here too? And, you know, after we're done shooting, we could just go out back and, you know, shoot some of these old school firearms. Could we do some of that? Maybe. I mean, look, that's pure speculation. But the fact is, live ammunition did make it on the set somehow, and it was not supposed to be on the set. There should have never even been a live bullet. We also talked about David Halls, who was the first assistant director on Rust, which made him the quote-unquote on-safety coordinator, that he pled guilty to a misdemeanor negligent use of a firearm a couple months ago, and that's most likely going to lead to him being a witness for the prosecution in this case. Look, he admits he's the one that handed the gun off to Alec Baldwin. He's the one that yelled cold gun, but he admits he also did not check the gun. You know, he was depending on the fact that all the guns on that cart were supposed to be cold guns, no live ammunition in it. But he pled guilty. And here's an interesting little tidbit for everybody. You know, look, David Hall's been in the industry all the way back to the 90s. He's been on movies Balls of Fury, Bad Santa, Matrix Reloaded, Fargo. I mean, these are some big productions. Coincidentally, he was also the first assistant director on a movie you might have seen called The Crow, Salvation. And if you remember the original Crow, Salvation was the sequel. The original Crow in 1993, Bruce Lee's kid, Brandon Lee, got killed on the set. Also by an on-set gun accident where there was a live bullet somehow on the set, and that's what killed Brandon Lee. What a coincidence. So it just goes to show that there's a reason why that they don't just have an armorer, why the veteran armorers and veteran prop masters did not want the job on Rust. They all turned it down, and they ended up getting this rookie armorer Hannah Gutierrez Lee, who's now facing felony criminal charges along with Alec Baldwin, and they had her doing two jobs over her protests, over her cautioning them that she was being stretched and she wasn't able to take all the safety precautions that needed to be done, over the fact that they had someone shoot themselves in the foot with a blank round, that had another live misfire, and an explosion on set. So, sheriffs and FBI reports have not identified the source of the live ammunition. Okay? Well, one thing that's really interesting that's going to come out, and we talked about this before the break, is there was an email sent the day before the shooting that most of the camera crew quit the production the night before the shooting. Okay? Before Helena Hutchins was killed, the day before, the camera crew quit. And one of the veteran camera crew leaders, he sent a text message to the production manager. Lane Looper is his name. And the text message, "This is super unsafe. This is super unsafe. We're out of here." Okay? The camera crew quit, and one of the camera women, Helena Hutchins, the cinematographer, she was over there trying to stay on set because she is a woman that's trying to succeed and being successful in a male-dominated industry. She decided to stay on set, and she believed in the film, the art of the film. And she was the one who actually directed Alec Baldwin. Hey, let's get this shot. Sit right in front of my camera, pull the gun out, point it right at the camera. And she died for that. She died for that art. But yeah, the camera crew quit. They sent the email. They sent the text message. So the safety on the set's not even going to be an issue at trial. So was there a civil lawsuit involved here? Because if you're following some of what's going on with Alec Baldwin in this case, is the Hutchins family, they sued Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez and some of the other people involved in the movie. And they sued them for wrongful death. And they had this big time law firm, Panachet Boyle, Brian Panish. I personally had dinner with the guy here at the Wynn a few months back. He gets all the big cases, man. He's a legend as a trial attorney. And they sued Alec Baldwin. Alec Baldwin cross-claimed. And so when you file a cross-claim, this is what it means. You're being sued, and now you're going to counter-sue some of the other people that are involved. And so Alec Baldwin, his attorney, said, well, you're going to counter-claim and cross-sue Hannah Gutierrez and David Hall and some of these other people, so that's kind of going to be your defense, because all of this would be settled at the same civil trial. So Alec Baldwin's going to get it in front of everybody and say, there was negligence and wrongdoing, but it's not on me. It's on them. It's on them. So acquit me of civil liability. Well, that's not even going to get to a trial, because the Hutchins family, they settled out of court for an undisclosed sum, probably a lot, with Alec Baldwin. And, Matthew Hutchins, the husband and the father of the kid that's going to grow up without a mom now, he came out, and he's actually an executive. He's actually now, as part of the settlement, he is a producer for Rust. So the film is actually going to go on. They are going to continue filming, and Matthew Hutchins is going to be involved as a producer on the set. And look, I mean, you might say he got bought off. The fact is, Matthew Hutchins is in the industry. His wife was in the industry. They know it was an accident. They got money. They're getting closure. And I think a little bit of what Matthew Hutchins wants is, hey, the last project that his wife was involved in, let's go forward and finish this bad boy. But he came out publicly and said he does not want to see recrimination of Alec Baldwin. What does recrimination mean? I take it to mean that he doesn't want to see Alec Baldwin prosecuted for this. So is Alec Baldwin going to see prison time on this case, even if he's convicted at trial? No, he's not. Not unless these DAs can ram a firearms enhancement on one of these counts that carries with it mandatory prison 1 to 5 years, which is, look, that's up in the air. But in my experience, when you come into court as a prosecutor and you have a conviction and the judge has discretion to either give somebody prison or give them probation, they're going to look at a number of things. And with Alec Baldwin, he's pretty much a productive, upstanding member of the community. He's not this guy who has a lot of criminal history. So you're not sending him to prison for that. You look at a fact of whether the conduct was intentional or not. This is an unintentional act, right? It's an accident. So are you going to send him to prison for that? Probably not. You're not. Well, one of the most critical factors that a judge considers and that a prosecutor considers is what does the victim in the case want to happen? If you're sitting over somebody and they are the mother of a dead child or the child of a dead mother or the brother of a dead sister, you're asking them, like, given what's going on in the case, what do you want to see happen as punishment? What do you want to see happen? And if the victim comes into court and tells the judge, I don't want to see this guy go to prison, I didn't even want to see prosecution. Well, the judges, if they don't have a reason to send the guy to prison, meaning this is a very bad person in society, this is a guy who has a criminal history, he's violent, they're not going to send him to prison. So let's get to the firearms enhancement, because there's been a lot of back and forth among attorneys over whether this firearm enhancement applies in this case. And I'm going to tell you, they're charging him with two different theories. Misdemeanor manslaughter based on negligent use of a firearm. You absolutely cannot add the firearms enhancement to that. The mandatory prison does not apply to that. The New Mexico Supreme Court came out back in 1993. And I'm looking at the decision right here. State v. Franklin. And in State v. Franklin, this was a case where there was two kids. They were friends. They were sitting out there and they were playing quick draw on a Sunday during a football game. They just kept drawing their firearms at each other. Yeah, it's pretty stupid behavior. Pretty stupid behavior is what you see in involuntary manslaughter cases. This criminally negligent behavior, it's got to be really above and beyond. It's not just you had an accident. It's how stupid could you be? Of course somebody was going to get hurt here. And one of the kids shot the other one and killed him. And it went to trial. And at trial, the prosecutors were trying to add the firearms enhancement to the same exact charge that they're bringing against Alec Baldwin. Involuntary manslaughter because you committed negligent use of a firearm misdemeanor. Okay, that's one of the theories. And the trial court struck the firearms enhancement. They said, no, if you're charging somebody for involuntary manslaughter through negligent use of a firearm, the firearm enhancement can't be added on because the firearm itself, all of that is subsumed into the involuntary manslaughter charge. You can't add the firearm enhancement to a firearms crime. And the DAs actually appealed that. They said, what? No, we can add that. And the New Mexico Supreme Court came out, or actually the New Mexico Court of Appeals, but this is a binding decision. Binding meaning the lower courts have to follow this. They came out and agreed with the trial judge. They said, if the basis of your involuntary manslaughter charge is a misdemeanor firearms count, you cannot then, what carries an 18-month probationable prison sentence, meaning the judge could give probation or could give prison, you cannot turn that into, it's 18 months discretionary with a 1 to 5 years mandatory prison. So the guy has to get at least 1 year in prison. We're not letting you change that into it. The legislature didn't intend that to happen, and we're not going to allow it. So they absolutely cannot add the firearms enhancement to the first theory of liability to Alec Baldwin. So it's 18 months of prison time if he's convicted at trial, and the judge has discretion to give him probation. He's going to get probation for all the reasons I just talked about. Well, in 1996, if we go down, and this is how law gets shaped. When I first went to law school, I thought everything was black and white. Comes out there's a reason why you have lawyers. The reason why you need a good lawyer is because everything is subject to interpretation, and your lawyers go in there and advocate for your interpretation. And there's still stuff that needs to be interpreted here, and this is what we're getting to. When you get to the second theory is involuntary manslaughter because you did something without due caution or circumspection. So it's not because of a firearm, technically. Now, they're going to say to wit at the end of that charge. They're going to say to wit because you basically handled a firearm in a crazy way and you shouldn't have done that. But they've never had a decision that came out and said, well, if you're basing involuntary manslaughter not on misdemeanor negligent use of a firearm, you're basing it on the criminal negligence part just generally without circumspection, and it's because of a firearm, they haven't addressed that specific issue of whether you can add that firearms enhancement on or not. What they have said is this. Look, we need criminal negligence, so it has to be recklessness. And we have said this, that in an aggravated assault case, where it's just aggravated assault, and you're saying it was done with a firearm, you can add the firearms enhancement to that. So this is what I mean. The law is kind of all over the place. And so what's going to happen in the Alec Baldwin case is I could imagine that the DAs, especially for leverage purposes, you're trying to get him to plead guilty. You want him to be facing mandatory prison. So we're going to add the firearms enhancement to the second charge without circumspection. And the attorneys for Alec Baldwin, if they're any good, they're going to try and appeal that before trial. They're not going to wait till after trial and after conviction to go, we want to challenge the firearms enhancement. No, let's challenge it up front. Let's get a ruling from the higher court. And this is a case where the higher court, you don't know what they're going to do, and I don't know what the makeup of the New Mexico Court of Appeals or Supreme Court is, but just based on public policy alone, are you going to be able to change involuntary manslaughter, which is it's a crime without intent? You don't have the mens rea, you know? You don't have the intent to actually hurt or kill somebody. Are you going to be able to change that into a mandatory prison firearm offense every time that you use the second theory, which is basically you used a firearm without due care, which is basically the same thing as negligent use of a firearm, but we'll just charge it under the second theory, and we can start adding firearms enhancements to all those cases. So let's just forget about the misdemeanor manslaughter rule. We want to put firearms enhancement on every case. Forget about misdemeanor manslaughter. We're going to go everything through without circumspection, without due care and circumspection, without caution. We're going to do everything under that theory. And I could see as a judge, as an attorney right now, and a former prosecutor, I have a problem with that. Okay? I'm all for, but this is what prosecutors do. And this is the way the law gets shaped. So they're not doing anything wrong, right? But if you give them a ruling where they can add that on to every single case and forget about, the 1993 decision, State v. Franklin, they could go back to State v. Franklin and go, man, that kid that shot his friend on a Sunday, we could have got that firearms enhancement if we just would have charged him under without caution and circumspection, to wit, used a firearm. We just charged him with the wrong one. If you give them that kind of power, they're going to use it. And they're going to use it. Why? Because in order to extract pleas out of people and not have to go to trial, because it takes so much resources and the system would crumble if you had to take everybody to trial, they need leverage. So that's going to be an issue here. So whether he can really face the firearms enhancement or not is an issue that still needs to be settled. I see attorneys on TV saying, oh, it can definitely come under the second theory. I see attorneys saying it can't come under either theory. The truth is, we don't know, because this